Welcome to Orbital Drop Shock Podcast. I am your host, Jared, and today we are talking about Fall of Reach Part 2, The Covenant. If you want to hear Part 1, please refer to our Under Two Capes episode. And I will get back to you at the end of this episode with the episode number if you want to go back to that. But first, before we get into the Halo comic, I want to acknowledge one thing. Today is the anniversary of the publication of Action Comics #1, June 1st, 1938. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not mention this, seeing as though this podcast network is devoted to comics and geek culture. And let's be honest, Superman kind of started the whole thing. Flipping through Action Comics #1 that I have as a reprint in the Action Comics 1000 edition, it's interesting to see like the way things have evolved. It's like Superman is much more detailed nowadays. His costume is much more detailed. And what's interesting is that he's significantly less powered. Like he can't fly. The only thing I don't think he has heat vision or frost breath. He's not even as strong, but it's still a cool story. And they even feature the iconic panel right there of him lifting the green car over his head. So yeah, I just figured I would acknowledge that Action Comics #1 came out in 1938 today. Just wanted to acknowledge the significant impact that that particular comic has had on geek culture. So anyway, so we're talking about Halo Fall of Reach. Actually, no, I'll talk a little bit more about this real quick. And so going back to this is also the first appearance of like Lois Lane, and but yeah, it was the establishment of the superhero genre because the story goes that Siegel and Schuster had gone to like newspaper after newspaper after newspaper advertising their Superman, and those same sources said, nah, it's too juvenile. But then the owner of DC, Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, I think his name is, it needed comics, it needed stories for his burgeoning, what would eventually become DC Comics. So he hired them and accepted Superman, and then it was published, and then it just went bananas. The popularity of this thing exploded. And then this is what led to like Batman, Wonder Woman, the JSA, and then eventually the JLA, and like everything we enjoy today, and everything I spent the past in 10 days, year talking about. So anyway, back to Halo. So Halo Fall of Reach. So this is part 2 of the Fall of Reach, and what this basically is. So this was, again, Marvel publishing what's basically the retelling of the Fall of Reach novel, but in comic book form. Now, you may be asking, when is this taking place? So this is taking place immediately. Well, this particular volume is taking place like, I think 25 years before. It takes place both 25 years and then shortly before Halo 1. It'll make sense after I bring it up. So it's pretty. So the Halo Fall of Reach was showing what happened previous to Halo 1. And this is taking place, I believe the third volume is taking place concurrently with Halo Reach. All right, so let's get into this. So if you remember beforehand, the Spartans had been trained and they had been augmented, and they had undertaken their first mission to kidnap an insurrectionist general, General Robert Watts, from his stronghold. So they get him out, and they think, oh, this is so great. We just captured insurrectionist general. Nothing can stop us now. And then Harvest happens. So in Harvest, they discovered the Covenant. And the Covenant go, humans, your destruction is the will of the gods, and we are their instruments. Basically, we're going to kill you. So now let's go to issue 1. I'm just going to go briefly through this, and we'll talk about it more. So we open up on the UNSC frigate Commonwealth, and they had just like observed a Covenant ship on scanners, and Dr. Halsey is like, you might want to go to battle stations in the Commonwealth, and the captain of the Commonwealth is like, yeah, don't tell me what to do. I'm the captain here. Then the Covenant ship just So basically in Halo, their version of hyperspace is called slip space. So they go, so it warps and then reappears immediately, like right next to the UNSC ship, which is supposedly impossible, but it's impossible for the UNSC, Halsey points out. And the Covenant fires like plasma torpedoes at the Covenant ship. Next, what happens is that the Commonwealth opens fire with missiles, only to have those missiles impact the Covenant shield. And I remember this is their first exposure to Covenant energy. Well, it's not their first. They thought that it's only the larger Covenant ships that have the energy shielding, but apparently it's not. So anyway, you may be wondering, why is Halsey even here? That'll be revealed later. So they're and the ship is heavily damaged, the Commonwealth. So their idea is send out a squadron of fighters, arm a nuke, and then arm a Mac cannon. So when you think of a Mac cannon, think of it like a railgun. So it just fires a single projectile, probably non-explosive, just really fast. So what his plan is, send the longsword fighters out, and this is what a longsword looks like right there. Send them out. They'll like harass the Covenant ship. Then we'll launch the Mac cannon. Then we'll fire the nuke. So the Mac cannon takes out the shields, and the nuke damages it. So they do that. They launch the Mac cannon, and they they launch the nuke. Then the nuke detonates. Actually, wait. Let me see. What would be the idea? Okay, so basically they fire the weapons. It damages the Covenant ship, and it gets out, and the ship like retreats for repairs. So the captain of the Commonwealth goes, okay, Halsey, get your people to the planet of Kai Seti 5, I think. Let me check that really quick. And is Kai Seti 4. We'll go repair. You do whatever you need to do on the planet. So Halsey takes the Spartans to the Damascus testing facility on the surface. And then she shows them Project Mjolnir, which is the Spartan armor that they have been famous for at this point. She explains to them that, okay, so we made this for the military, but you're the only ones who can use it, because if you remember from our previous episode, they got those augmentations to like their skeleton. So because of those augmentations, they're the only ones that can handle the enhanced reflexes of this suit. When they tried with unaugmented individuals, didn't turn out that well. They like spasmed and got killed. Then the Master Chief, being the dude he is, decides, okay, I'm going to test it first. If it doesn't work, if it kills me, don't use it. So he puts on the suit. He starts to move. He puts on the helmet, and then it's the Chief doing what Chief does best, and that's testing stuff. So Captain Wallace of the Commonwealth says, okay, the Covenant ship is coming back. So what we're going to do is we're going to cause a distraction and to keep the Covenant off you. But Blue Team, which is made up of John 117, Kelly 87, and Sam 34, and by those numbers, I'm just refreshing for those who haven't seen the episode. Spartan 2s have numbers because that's the list that's they're placed on the list of 150 candidates that Halsey kidnapped for the Spartan program. So what eventually goes down is John's plan is, okay, so we're going to take a Pelican dropship. We're going to take the nuke. We're going to infiltrate the Covenant ship. Somehow we're going to get in. We're going to go 0G and infiltrate. We're going to plant the nuke in the middle of the ship, then boom, detonate. That way it blows from the inside out instead of the nuke just hitting the shields and just taking out the shields. So they go 0G, and that ends issue 1. Issue 2, they're going in, they're approaching the Covenant ship. So they're like, how are we going to get inside? So their idea is, okay, so a Covenant ship has these laser turrets. And they reason that if you look at the laser turrets, the shields have to open a little bit in order for the lasers to fire without like shooting the shields. So they're like, okay, so we're going to go right as the cannons are about to fire. So basically they're jumping down the barrel of this gun. So they get in. It succeeds, and they're all good, and actually get in through the hole in the hull created by the Commonwealth. They get in, they start going throughout the Covenant carrier. They open a door, and then they come face to face with a jackal or the Kig Yard. They're the ones in Halo with the shields and the pistols. So they're firing, and then so what they do is they kill the jackal, and then this side grabs, basically loot the body, because the scientists at the Office of Naval Intelligence will want to be able to basically maybe build stuff that can help us more effectively counter the Covenant. This is foreshadowing later on. So anyway, they grab everything. They reach, so they're going down a corridor, and then a jackal appears behind them, and Chief is about to be hit, but Sam pushes him out of the way and takes the shot for him, and it like fries part of his armor. Now remember, at this point, their armor does not have shielding, so he's actually feeling the burn, and it's kind of messing up the plates of armor. So this is kind of a callback to when the Spartan 2s went after Watts in the previous volume, because John took the bullet for Sam. And this is like Sam's way of like repaying him. So they reach the core of the ship. Sam's alive, and they get up and they just move on. So what they do is they seal the door and plant the nuke, but Sam has to stay behind because his suit seal is ripped. So if he steps out into space, he's going to die anyway. So he just goes, let me just stay here and defend the nuke. It's the best I can do. At least I can go out with a bang. It's like the send me out with a bang thing. You think about it, this is the first Spartan KIA. By KIA, I mean killed in action. So Sam and Kelly leave as the nuke's going on, counting down. Sam stays and defends the bomb. Bomb goes off and the Covenant ship blows up. And then Kelly's like, she's kind of heard about Sam. But what John has a flashback to when his trainer, Chief Petty Officer Mendez, his trainer said, you have to be willing to send soldiers to their deaths, but you have to be able to know the difference between spending lives and wasting lives. Now, what John says at this point is Sam's life was not wasted. It taught us that we can beat the Covenant. That's the end of this battle. And now the book skips over 27 years to 2552. So it's around the time, so this is approaching the time that Halo Reach would be taking place. Now, at this point, we're on the planet Sigma Octanus 4. Just a standard colony, and we open up on a UNSC Warthog, which a Warthog is basically a Jeep like that has a big machine gun on the back. It's the most iconic Jeep in gaming, I would say. So Corporal Harland and his guys are rolling down. They're trying to raise their fire base. As they get there, a Covenant Banshee shows up. The Banshee is the air vehicle right there, and they start returning fire. And when they reach the base, they see when they reach the city of Kota Azur, which is, I think it's like Blue Coast or something like that. They see it's like wrecked, like completely wrecked. That ends issue 2. Issue 3, they arrive at their fire base, which is called Camp Alpha, and it's a mess too, to the point where the only to the highest rank that's there is Corporal Harlan. So he's the commander of the base. So he and then he asked when the soldiers there what happened. He's like, well, they sent in tanks first, and then they sent in grunts. So there was no way that we could hold off. There's like so many tanks, and then we'll explain what grunts are later. So anyway, Harlan gets on strategic command. It gets on the radio with strategic command and goes, hey, we need backup, and we need evac for the wounded. So then Stratcom comes back and says, hey, backup's on the way. And he's like, okay, that's great, but the transmission drops in the middle of the call. So Harlan goes, okay, we have to like reestablish the link. And then when the soldiers, it goes, hey, it's a dropship coming in. So it's one dropship. And then Harlan's like, okay, it's a burial detail. We're not going to do one dropship. Are you kidding me? Give me 100 dropships. Then we got something. Then what comes off the dropship are the Spartan 2s. And what I like here, as opposed to in issue 2, in issue like 1, when they first introduced the Mjolnir armor, and this is showing how far they've developed. in 27 years. Each Spartan kind of has their own unique armor configuration. So like Kelly has her standard EVA helmet that's like glass in the front. John has his armor. Fred has the commando armor. And this would be, and this book came out, I think around the time of, or like after Reach. So it's pretty obvious that they would be influenced in terms of armor design. The artist who is, the artist's name is, hang on, is Felix Ruiz. So it's pretty obvious that Ruiz at this point would be influenced by Reach, which I like how they're kind of bringing that in. So Chief shows up and he goes, okay, we're assuming command of this operation. Load your wound on the Pelican. Have the rest of them on the defenses. And he calls up his Spartans and goes, okay, guys, green team leader Linda, you guys are going to, first you guys are going to go police up the wounded. Then so what's going to happen is he says, okay, guys, we have two missions. Number one, obtain intelligence on what the Covenant wants. And second off, detonate a nuke in the city, because at this point, there's like, they think no civilians there. So just plant the nuke, and we're going to blow up the Covenant occupation force. Yeah, they do a lot of nuking in Halo. It's ridiculous. So he tells a red team leader, Joshua 029, he goes, you guys are going to patrol up the coast. And then he says, you guys are going to recon the wharf areas. And then he tells Linda, green team leader, you're going to follow the ridge and check out the residential area. And then blue team is going to go to the center of town and plant the nuke. So they fall out, team gears up. And then he says, and it was kind of funny is Harlan goes, okay, guys, what if there are any survivors? So Chief's like, survivors, Corporal, have you ever seen what the Covenant does to survivors? And then just the Corporal's like, all right, good point. So then the story cuts to in orbit, where there's a space battle going on as well. And then we cut to the UNSC Iroquois under the command of Captain Jacob Keyes. Yes, that Captain Jacob Keyes from Halo 1. And they're talking, they're observing the battle. And then they notice the repair ship, the Cradle. So the Covenant fire like a lot of plasma at the UNSC fleet. So what the Cradle does is it maneuvers itself in front and acts like a shield to buy the UNSC ships time to arm up their weapons and lock on targets. So what they do is, so basically what happens is that the Cradle gets taken out, and then the UNSC ships open up on the Covenant ships. Then what happens is the Iroquois notices one of the Covenant ships is peeled off in the battle and is receiving a transmission from the surface. So what I think is hilarious is that he says, okay, so Keyes goes, okay, so we're going to launch some missiles at the ship. But then the ordnance officer is like, okay, guys, okay, Captain, we can't lock on that, whatever that beam is, it's interfering with our targeting. So Keyes goes, okay, we're just going to ram the ship. He goes, run the bastards over. So, yeah, he actually just runs the Covenant ship over, which is fantastic. Back in the city of Sigma Octanus, of Côte d'Azur, actually, blue team is in the sewers, and they're going under the, they're trying to find a place to plant the nuke, and then they go to the Museum of Natural History, but they notice there seems to be like a lot of Covenant guarding this building. So what they decide is, okay, when was the last time the Covenant has shown interest in anything human besides to blow it up? So you decide, okay, we're still going to plant the nuke, but we're going to check this out because maybe we can get some intel on like what the Covenant want. So what the chief does, he splits up on blue team. Him, James, and Fred, James, Fred, and Kelly go into the hotel while the rest of blue team stays behind and arms the nuke. So they go in and they notice something's weird because there's a jackal on the ground, but it's like crushed, like completely crushed. And they're like, there's a boot print in that. What could be large enough to cause that much of a boot print to like crush a jackal? So what they discuss, so they check in. So John checks in with the Spartans, and then Red Team says, "Yeah, we found survivors in the wharves that were hiding in shipping containers." So John calls up Green Team and says, "Rendezvous with Red Team and help escort the civilians back to the extraction point." In the meantime, they head to the center of the museum and find this crystal and this Covenant device. It's the exact device that's beaming that transmission into orbit that we saw later that the Covenant ship was receiving. So they're like, okay, so we're going to take this thing with us. Before they can do that, they start hearing like large footsteps coming toward them until they discover the Megalekolo, aka hunters. These things are a pain in the butt. So issue 4, and I believe there are 4 issues. So I know we're going through this a little fast, but we're gonna go back through the general ideas of it later. I'm just going through the plot really briefly. So what Keyes does, and now, so back in orbit, now that the Covenant ship has been dealt with, Keyes says, okay, drive us into that beam so we can receive the transmission and record everything for the intelligence people. So they drive into it, they do as he says. Back on the ground, the Spartans are facing a hunter, but their rounds are like bouncing off the armor. Anyone that's played Halo knows that this is what happens when you fight hunters. You have to hit them in like the orange spots and stuff. But the hunter fires its cannon and hits James in the arm, burning his arm off. So he's armless at this point. So John's plan is that he goes, okay, Fred, throw me 2 grenades. So Fred throws him 2 frag grenades. John takes the grenades, throws them at the crystal. The crystal shatters and falls and lands on the hunters. Actually, it weakens the hunters. And then John and James push it over, and it falls onto the hunters, crushing them. So, and now the Spartans grab the device that was being beamed. Then they fall back. And then, so the nuke is armed now, so they have to return to the base, get on the Pelican, and get out. So they retreat back to base, get on the Pelican, and leave. And now, one of the greatest scenes ever, John goes, wipe him off the face of the planet. Then they detonate the nuke, and that's basically the level of destruction caused by a Havoc nuke. So now Keyes and the Iroquois are going through the ship, going through the remains of the space battle, just trying to see if there are any lifeboats, any survivors and escape pods that they can pick up before they leave. As they leave, they're docked with an Oni ship. Oni is basically, think of them as the CIA of Halo. Oni shows up and says, okay, so we need access to that information so we can download it and get intel off the Covenant. So Keyes gives him his office and says, okay, go ahead. So, and the Spartans leave, arrive back in the Iroquois as well. And they're told, okay, we're going back to Reach. And it's not an indication of like what happens later in the story. It's just like, okay, we're going to go return to base. And then Keyes leaves, but as his ship is entering slip space, a Covenant probe latches on. And the probe is, think of the probe basically as a tracker. So now the Covenant knows the location of Reach. And that's the end of Halo Fall of Reach, Volume 2, The Covenant. So, in terms of the storyline, I felt this was a pretty accurate and faithful representation of the novel. They left some stuff out, which I understand because it's like, because otherwise it would be like much larger of a comic, which I'm fine that they kept in what they had to. And I definitely, the death of Sam, basically, it definitely hits harder when we're talking about like a visual representation of that scene. And you can definitely, and I liked how there was a part where I think it's John or Kelly goes, it's a good thing we wear helmets because we would, they say Spartans aren't supposed to be crying, but it's a good thing we wear helmets. Trying to find where it was. I think that was in the, I think that was in the movie, because they made a live action animated movie of it that basically had that same scene. So, okay, so Marvel, so I mentioned earlier that we did an episode of Under Two Capes talking about Halo comics. That was episode 32 of the podcast. Yeah, episode 32 of Under Two Capes. I titled it Marvel Did Halo Comics because it's kind of interesting finding out that Marvel Comics did Halo. But then again, they did a lot of licensed out products. Like they did Transformers, G.I. Joe, and a bunch of other stuff to help them market. And we're as soon as we finish the Fall of Reach series, we're going to be going to the next Halo series. So we're going to keep going through all the Halo comics in, as best as I can, chronological order. Okay, so now going back to what I thought of Fall of Reach. Now, again, I liked how when you go back to on the Sigma Octanus battle, how each Spartan has like a unique armor set based on what they do. Like Linda, the sniper, has the scout helmet. Obviously, they can only give John the Mark IV helmet because John's always has like the basic helmet. But I kind of liked how they tried to make it fit with the design, with their role. Like James had the explosive ordnance disposal, Fred had commando, Kelly had EVA. I'll try and hold this closer to the camera, and if you want to see what I'm showing to the camera, go to Comics League Network on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. All right, so anyway, I also liked how they showed like the hunters like completely trouncing Spartans visually, because again, being that comics are a visual medium, it's more like palpable, the emotions and the desperation and the fear when you see a visual. And they also show the hunters are like ridiculously tall compared to the Spartans, which are already massively like tall. Really like scary. You don't really get a sense of that scale in the video games. All right. And then I liked they showed the massive nuclear explosion right about here. So I was like, oh geez, that has gotta hurt. And I liked how they showed like the chaos of the space battle too, because you see like a lot of stuff is going down. They effectively communicated like the cradle going over and getting blown up. They show the shock of the Iroquois bridge crew as the cradle is blown up. And then they say, okay, so, and then Admiral Whitcomb, I believe, gets on the radio and says, light them up, people. And they just go to work taking out the Covenant. So that's what I thought of Fall of Reach. It's definitely, of the Halo comics that I personally have read, it's either this or the Lone Wolf comic series, which we'll talk about later on in this show. This is like one of my favorite Halo comics of all time. Either this particular volume or just this whole series, The Fall of Reach, which I feel like they should do more with the adopting. I think Dark Horse is the one that does Halo comics now. I think that what they should do now is adopt more of the novels into comics. I think that'd be really cool. All right, so anyway, that's the end of this episode. Next week, we'll be talking about Invasion, which deals with the Covenant invasion of Reach. And that one is going to take place during Halo Reach and then immediately before Halo 1. So anyway, that's the end of this episode. Like, comment, to subscribe to a Comics League Network, where we talk about, where we have many different shows associated with fandom. Like we have Star Wars, which was recorded Monday. That's the Knights of Mandalore series. So tomorrow, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow because there's not that much drastic Snyder news, but I'll still cover developments in Snyder fandom and stuff. I'll cover Army of the Dead stuff then. Then I'll actually do I think an Army of the Dead review. And then what we'll do is on Thursday, we do like a general comic book news channel where I pick an article from like a recent article from like a comic book news site and discuss it and tell you my thoughts. And then Friday, Lad and I do the Under Two Capes podcast, which is our flagship show that's on here and an Apple podcast. The other shows are YouTube exclusives. We talk about like general Marvel, DC comic stuff. Like I think this week I'm trying to pull up our topic list because I have a general list of what I like to cover in each episode or what I want to cover throughout the podcast. I think we are going to cover, hang on, I'm trying to see, because I'm thinking we could build our own Suicide Squad because I haven't done that yet. Or, okay, so let me see. What's going to be this Friday's episode? I'm thinking if we did Spider Island, we did Black Widow fan theories, we might review. I think I'll probably review one of my newer comics that I got when we did the Comic Hall episode. So it'll probably be, actually, you know what? We'll do Green Lantern Rebirth. I think it's a good idea to do Green Lantern Rebirth because I love that series. So we'll do that. I believe we're going to do Green Lantern Rebirth. All right. So that's what we have to look forward to. It's based Monday through Friday. I try and do an episode of something of one of the other shows. And then follow us on Instagram at Under Two Capes 2020. And remember, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what Halo comics you want, what Halo fandom you want me to cover. And I will definitely do that. Anyway, bye-bye. Remember, prepare to drop.